Welcome back. Glad to be with you. Big question. Big question for you. What's the upside in the expanding, tightening matrix world that we've covered in so much detail and depth in terms of this particular YouTube channel? What is the upside of the expanding matrix? Let's give you a little look around so you can feel. Got the stick out. And I've also realized something. As a 96% male channel, God bless the 4% of females, you are incredibly welcome and thank you for supporting me. I have a bit of a male type delivery and I talk about a lot of supposedly gender male topics, but I'm glad that there are some women that are finding their way to follow and enjoy, and I celebrate you. But given that majority, I noticed that just doing a YouTube yesterday from inside my car on a bright sunny day, at a very bad time, typically, YouTube tells me from the stats that you should be doing 30% of your followers are from United States of America, just about. And I should be doing it at 6 o'clock to catch my American friends. And of course, everybody wants to broadcast at the right times. I'm a little bit more, I don't care too much for stats and matrix. I like to talk if it feels like time to talk. And I did a YouTube yesterday where I showed some of my fiat. I wasn't even prepared for it. I almost feel bad because I had my Turkish lira and my pesos somewhere. I wanted to show you all the different countries of currencies. It almost felt like I had to come back. But the point was made. But I did it when I felt like it. And what I found is just the different thumbnail on the video and the different time was actually, a lot of people got really excited. And because of the quite a strong male audience, men love cars. Men love cars. And for my very patient and endearing females, bear with us a second. There's a message behind it. If that sort of thing it bores you to tears. But men love machines, particularly like cars and gadgets. So I've gratuitously placed a different machine in the backdrop here. It's a bit, not all of them like motorbikes, but anyway, this is my Liberty scooter. My Liberty scooter. Why? Because there's nothing that says freedom like being in a nice, desolate, deserted, lowly inhabited place like Namibia, on open sand plains, burning your way back after a 10-day, 2,500 kilometer round trip on a motorcycle. And you've got a mile in front of you before the guy in front of you and his dust cloud, and the guy behind you is more than a mile behind you. And you're traveling convoy style, killing the kilometers. And it's in one actual instance on that trip that I did not so long ago, and it cost me a cracked rib. I think it was fully broken, but I don't want to be heroic. Truth is, I would classify myself as a crap rider, but an implicit freedom seeker, for which a motorcycle just seems to tick all the boxes. I'll give you a small bit of narrative and fun. It is a weekend. Maybe you guys like a little bit of storytelling. Grab your coffee and tuck up. There's some really powerful messages coming here as well, by the way. But for those that are impatient, you're free to leave. Anyway, so there's something very implicit about the freedom that a motorcycle gives you, so much so that this is the market sniper in this particular location motorcycle. I was fortunate enough to get it new, and I had it decaled up with our luminous website decals because I could. And you know what? It was, as I mentioned in Rand terms, it was ridiculously cheap. And I always like something a little bit different. I don't want to have the off-the-shelf item that everybody else has. I think we all have that. I'm not unique in us. We want to tweak it, but I just didn't want it to look like all the others. And what I noticed from when I did the YouTube from the car is that many of you were saying, oh, you like cars, I bet you've had some interesting cars, tell us about your cars, 1 or 2 comments. And actually there's a story about reset and your finances that runs through my car narrative. So for those of you that are less interested in cars, let me just warn you that there's real learnings in all of those things. So cars and motorcycles, I'm fortunate to have a road bike and a scrambler in other locale where I also spend a lot of time, both Husqvarna, because they're not KTM, even though they're owned by KTM. They look slightly different. It's for the guy that does something slightly different, the Husqvarnas. And I have an out-and-out off-roader, which is lighter than this one, and no top box. It's just purely for the dirt. As I said, crap rider. And then a really nice poser cafe racer, a 701 Vitpielen as well. So I'm really spoiled. And these are what I call my freedom premiums. This is what I pay for lifestyle and grabbing those freedom moments. As I mentioned, in the one plane in that Namibia tour, I was slower than some of the guys through the real twisty bits. A, because I'd taken a fall and didn't fancy falling again and was riding with a crap rib. And B, because they were probably quicker and better riders than me, started to feel a bit behind. There was a small wind and I started to gas this brand new bike because I'd essentially got it brand new and went straight on this tour. So I had no understanding of it, no connection yet with it, and it was brand new. Good friend literally got the owners to take it and get it through its first service, literally demo ride it for me so that I could take it first service done straight on the tour. So I got off the plane. It was all kitted up. It had all Market Sniper decals, all arranged offline. Literally went in the store, got this custom decaled bike and went straight up, had it flown straight up for our Namibia tour. I was saying, gee, it's starting to get windy here. You know, I was standing up in the pegs, then I was sitting down and I was gassing it, trying to catch up because I was just seeing the dust cloud really far, getting the feeling I'd fallen a bit behind. We do convoy rules, so you don't want to eat the guy in front of you's dust cloud. Namibia is very desolate, but the dirt roads are some of them are exceedingly good, and they're broad and they're long and flat. So actually, they're almost better than tarmac roads in terms of you're not likely to get eaten by a truck or another vehicle, and you can usually see them coming for the dust cloud really far off. And it was getting windier and windier. I was feeling, and I was gassing, and then I looked down and I realized I was doing 170 k's per hour on that speedo, and I was like, no wonder it's feeling so windy up here and my neck is getting stiff. So we all adrenaline's junkies and chasing the speed. That was not indicative of the speeds we did in the technical session areas at all. It was in a very high vis, stinking hot environment where we had a logistics truck feeding us. It was like army for the rich luxury guys. It's like glamping in comparison to what the other guys. We had a logistics truck with drinks and ice, and we were literally putting ice blocks down our back. The heat came early last year, September, October, and we actually faced 42 degrees. And the wind was at least cooling if it was coming at you fast. It was really, really hot. Anyway, you got that feeling of freedom when you have wide open places, no cell phone towers, no 5G, and I'm going to be coming back to both these topics shortly. No infrastructure of any real element. You got that feeling of nature. We went through an elephant park. We saw elephants, not at that speed, by the way. That was just a bit of a unique piece of area where you could kill distance. There was some really technical riding. We were right up to the the border of Angola on the Cunene River in this ride. And it was absolutely magnificent, and I enjoyed it despite getting a bit of pain. Got a bit of heat stroke. In short, my lack of Africa time, I was battling harder than the others who cope better in the heat. We were drinking water, and the drinks at night didn't help. Anyway, so the main content I'm going to discuss here is concept of depreciating assets, being in the matrix, and maybe what are the advantages of the matrix. So in some senses, this channel is almost a misery porn channel in some degree. I think of it far more than that, and I hope you don't see it like that. But I do talk about an ever-tightening and escalating control structure, which is certainly a great concern. But when we go back and we look at all the technology advances that have occurred, so let's just take a look at 5G and other things. There is actually every time a new technology comes, a great resistance to it. By the way, that's not me saying there's no reason to be concerned about what's going on 5G. I haven't suddenly flipped and done a sellout on you. I'm saying, how do we frame mentally to go forward? If we're just in doom and misery mindset, there's no positive outcome on that. You've got to think, where's the gain for all of this? What can I change? Recognize that you can change, and recognize that probably you can't. In an email I saw an example of about 58 images where 5G towers have been torched, burnt, or vandalized in some way. And while at a soul level I sympathize with those actions, in actual fact, I don't think that if any of you were to go out and do that, you would stop anything. Those towers will be re-resurrected, greater security will be put around them, cameras will be put around them, people will be caught, people could be charged with terrorism, industrial terrorism, and I'm all for the call for pushback. But we've got to be clever in what manner that pushback takes. And we've got to be clever about how we protect our liberties. Is out and out terrorism of infrastructure the best way to go about it? Maybe it is. I'm just not so sure. I'm not the guy that's going to go out and burn him, even though my first feeling when I see him is one of resentment. And can I tell you that Plato in 371 BC said of the pen and paper, the pen and paper is a great curse to humanity. It's going to reduce people's ability and to remember things and use their memory. And actually I read that and I thought, he's right. He's right. Being able to write things down means you no longer had to commit things to memory. You no longer had to commit things to memory. You knew you could refer back to where you'd stored it. Now, would you say overall that it was a bad thing for the development of society? Do you think they had better brains than us today, were smarter than us today on average? The admirable Plato aside, do you think they were more awake, or more advanced? Do you think they had a longer lifespan than us in 371 BC than they do today? Maybe they did. I don't think so. What we can say is in the recent history, our lifespan has been lengthening. Will it start to shorten? That could be a risk as a result of some of these techs. But at the same time, every major technology, and I stress again, I don't like what I'm hearing and what I'm reading about 5G, but it's a case of, are you best served recognizing the opportunities and maxing them out and withholding from obvious acts of vandalism potentially reframed as terrorism to put you away for a very long time and being a martyr to the extreme libertarian cause? Or are you best served to look after yourself, your family environment, take it out of the matrix as best you can and have a living world less surrounded by EMS signals through building wealth and growing, yes, growing your personal financial security and avoiding all the traps that will come with the Great Reset, and then being able to make better quality choices that may involve investment you couldn't have made if you turned into a grassroots terrorist against progress. And some progress isn't progress worth having. In other words, I stress, not everything that has been created is worthwhile. This isn't a flippening moment. I have to ask you, remember DiMartini? I spoke with him in detail on a number of my clips. If you haven't seen them, I'd suggest you Google the Market Sniper, not Google, YouTube it, because they're actually on YouTube. And I'll come back to those two names as well again, because they are darkness, and at the same time, for me, they have been opportunity. The YouTube that, and you'll see that we shouldn't frame things purely in the sense of bad and good. You should see challenge and opportunity. There's the challenge that they will bring, and then there's the opportunity. Unless you think you can stop all states of the world from rolling out 5G single-handedly or with a small band of pub mates, you should think about this concept that I'm thinking. You should do it. Absolutely you should. And what I'm saying is not treasonous to the libertarian cause. I think we should write letters to MPs about concerns about health. We should insist that they try and make as many modifications that they are healthy, or have them taken down until it is. Everything else, and if writing isn't doing it, certainly escalate and go further. I'm not going to personally be at the sharp end of attaching limpet mines to masts. And this is pragmatism. It's not that I actually value people that are prepared to invoke warrior spirit and push back hard and look to prevent adverse events from materializing. But within that, we have to look how many revolutions we've gone through. How many revolutions we've gone through. In the same way I speak of Plato, there were people that spoke of the negativities of the telegram and yearned for the day that their mail arrived twice a month on the shipping carrier. There were people that yearned and mourned for many ends of things that never saw the progress. Ford himself said, if I asked the people what they most seek, they would say a faster horse. This is Henry Ford that brought us the automobile. In other words, people themselves are not good at knowing what next is best or possible. And often the science suits the times far better in retrospect than when it's first being rolled out. There is going to be an Internet of Things in my worldview, and I don't think I can stop it. There's going to be a 5G revolution. I don't think I can stop it. I welcome those who think they can, but I would suggest to them, don't get yourself put away for a very long time. That doesn't mean we're passive about nasty effects. Things that are bad in their first iteration can be made safer and better in second and third iterations. So look to try harness the forces that are coming at us rather than kill them. I think they are greater than you and I, unfortunately, and they will come regardless. So going back to YouTube, a little bit of a life story, and I'm going to intertwine answering the cars element. So as a young man, very early in his life, I decided that one of my goals, I remember my very first goal was to have a black and red. I don't know if you remember Tom Cruise in Top Gun. I'm sure some of you will. The classic. I loved the Kawasaki Ninja. I was still an upper teenager during that era. And I made it a goal to get myself a Kawasaki Ninja. And I got a later version to the 900 Ninja that featured in the Top Gun movie. I got myself the later version, which was really nice. I bought it secondhand. I saved up for it. I really wanted it. I wanted to be fast. I wanted a sports bike for everything it would say about me. And once again, on a road riding basis, I was a pretty poor rider. In fact, I had it in the army in my second year as a lieutenant, and I had a major fall that saw me end up in number 1 military hospital in Pretoria, for which I still carry a scar today. Oh, let's see if you can do this. Where's the scar? There it is. That turned you all seasick. I had a bag of screws, not the smartest thing to have in your pocket when doing a long distance trip from Palabora to home. I'd wangled a nice little move. You see, I had bad skin. I made it work for me. The thing is, taking the things you have and making them work for me. You see, in the army, you weren't ever allowed not to shave. You had to be given a shaving pass. So here comes a bit of narrative for you. So, as a lieutenant in his second year, having earned his rank and no longer looking after a platoon of infantrymen, I was in an ops office. I was only interested in getting out and getting home to my mates where I could have parties, have a few beers and talk crap. And the military had become what many people thought it was in the first sense. The 2 years of compulsory military had become a bit of a prison sentence. Although I'd got rank, I was an officer. It's a very small percentage that it became an officer. I was looking to my life beyond. And only in Pretoria can they issue you a shaving pass. And I had bad skin. And it couldn't be permanently issued. It had to elapse and you had to get it renewed. So I used this system to get out of the base. And because Palabora was far away from Pretoria, there was only a SAML, which is a truck that goes between Petersburg, Palabora, and then a train where you could catch from Petersburg to Pretoria every Thursday and Tuesday. So essentially I would go get a train ticket and I would book it on the Monday, so that I would leave on Monday. I would be supposedly put up in Petersburg after the SAML drove me to Petersburg. I'd wait for my train on Tuesday. I would always book my appointment on the Wednesday or the Thursday so that I couldn't come back that Thursday. All the way in Pretoria, I'd show up for something that was nothing more than a formality and a signing of paper. This is how military systems work, by the way, in Pretoria. 10, 20 minutes at tops, get my shaving pass, the right not to shave, extended for another 2 or 3 months. I can't remember how long they allowed it, because it could only be temporary. It expired automatically. That way they prevented soldiers growing big ass beards. And then I would come back. On the Thursday, but then I would miss that SAML, so I'd only come back the next Tuesday officially, and I would have to be put up at the military's expense in hotels half the way back and forward. And I would get issued a voucher to go to Pretoria and all these things that the state would pay, the train trip, the accommodation, and I would conveniently make these bookings on the basis that it took an entire week of 4 weeks in a month to get this afforded to me. And then I realized I could actually go with my motorcycle instead of using the actual train tickets and the accommodation, ride straight home, show up for the half hour, which was not as far from Pretoria, show up for the half hour and get my shaving pass renewed and go back to home. And apart from the short travel from Johannesburg to Pretoria, couple of hours, I had a week off that I'd engineered over and above normal pastime, and I would go meet my local friends and I would run around. And one of these journeys, riding from the base, instead of using the vouchers that were afforded me, going straight home in essence, I was speeding along in the beautiful open roads and I took a tumble. And as a military person, I had to go to a military hospital. So I was in huge trouble. Because actually I should have been in a train and on a truck somewhere trundling along. So my whole ruse got a little bit found out. But anyway, that whole story aside, I was making something and a system work for me, and I've kind of been that way all the time. You've got to find and understand how a system works, and you've got to crack it and hack it so it gives you the best life that you can for your goals and objectives at the time. Now, having time with my friends and beers for a week while supposedly still serving my 2 years' time was good for me. I wouldn't have said it's the highest and most almighty agenda. It's typical of that of somebody my age at the time, in his teens, 18, 19, and 20. And as a result, they were not high valued. And in the same way, the next goal I had after getting my Ninja, after I finally got coaxed out off my sports bike and road bikes for an extended period following that fall, was to have a Porsche. So this was all about my social standing, being cool, looking good, and everything that goes with this. I wanted a Porsche before 25 to prove that I'd progressed in life. I wanted a sports car initially, and then I decided the 911 was the best. I had lots of discussions. I stayed away from real exotica. That would be a headache and cost you a fortune. The 911s were pretty robust, didn't need too much servicing, and went like the stink. Had a few unique handling traits. I bought myself, for those that want to follow the car story, a 1976 Carrera, black, with chrome decals all the way around the door. Proper classic Porsche. Everywhere you went, it was almost becoming a collectible. Now it would be worth an absolute stink. And it was a stablemate of the classic RS 70. I think it's a 74 RS, Carrera RS, which was lighter, had 4 bhp more. This was the talkier, more everyday usable one that came a couple of years after its the all-time classic RS racing spec Renspeed Carrera RS. And it was an amazing car to own and drive. I loved it. And being a young man, I blame this event on the Audi Quattro advert series that had rallying cars taking off and absolutely flying. The Audi Quattro was killing everything in the rallying world. And I used to see these clips of these insane sounds. They had these four-wheel drive, turbocharged Audi Quattros absolutely nailing it over a peak and flying through the air. On one such a peak, I actually was flooring my 911 to see if I could get it airborne, as a silly child would do. in a fairly desolate road, it has to be said. That's, I thought, in initial senses at that time was safe to do, and I ended up coming over the top, only to find at the bottom someone was doing, for whatever reason, a 3-point turn, and decided to do it in the middle of the road, and was at that point reversing up my lane as part of completing their turn. And I struck him from behind and destroyed the vehicle. Thankfully did no permanent damage to either of us, but I was speeding at the time. And through further folly of my own, following a large amount of claims and changing insurer, ended up not to be insured, not properly insured. And I want to say that was indicative of my time, not focusing on detail, putting a large proportion of my wealth into a depreciating asset and seeking status, seeking what's the word, social standing potentially. I did love the speed and the sports. I had amazing memories from it. I went with the great drives early in the morning with the Porsche Club when the roads were empty and there were just lines of us, turbos and everything. It was phenomenal ownership experience. I won't deny that. But it was disproportionate, imbalanced, and I executed it very immaturely. And as a result of that, I faced virtually 100% loss. I sold the car as a wreck for 36%, about 35% of what I'd initially paid for it. In fact, slightly more like 30%. And it was restored, and I got to see it later. And today it would be worth a small fortune. But this is what happens. Money flows from people who manage it appropriately towards them, and it flows away from people that don't. So I'm going to say that one again, and this is something that if you do the DeMartini, the Market Sniper YouTube Google, you will find that. You've got to earn your right to leverage is one of the most famous sayings that I regularly reiterate, and you've got to value something if you expect it to grow. If you don't value it and you think, oh, you all value money. No, you don't. If you value money, you're always thinking about how you can be as effective with it as possible and how you can make it grow. In other words, if I give you $1 million, pounds, euros, if the first thing you tell me you will do with it is to go buy a house, a great car, and get a proper holiday break for you and your family, that may all be amazing things, and the house may indeed turn out to be a decent, half-decent investment, although the vehicle will almost invariably be a depreciating asset. Forget classic cars, which is a very unique slice for which you need an immense amount of experience. I had a brother with an E-Type Jag V12, spoked and all proper convertible as well, roadster. And I mean, I think he made a little bit of money on his, or he held his value, but it was in a depreciating currency, gave him a lot of headaches. I don't think the exercise was worthwhile. If you have a Ferrari Dino, good luck to you. But forget that as an investment segment. You don't have the qualifications. You simply don't. And you need to buy in at the top. You need to buy in a really aggressive market. And the liquidity of that market dries up in downturns. So watch out. So vehicles are depreciating assets. Having all your wealth tied up in a depreciating asset is not a smart idea. It simply isn't. And when you're pursuing attention from girls and women, you want to dress up great, you want to look like a man of the world, and you want to show off a little bit. It's broadly not a good space. And it's something we all go through as young men. It's something I didn't get over in any great hurry. In fact, I had an amazing stable of vehicles, but more and more I started to recognize you don't get out with good money out of a car. And I can tell you from my Ukraine experience, when the cash dried up and the ATMs closed, cars were selling, near to new cars were selling for 30% of what their worth was, when they were probably worth still 85, 90% of their roll-off dealer from floor. They were selling for 25 and 30%. And I am expecting the same to happen. So the only thing I do, you might say, well, hang on, you've got 3 motorbikes in different geographic locations just so that you can ride. So here's the thing. You've got to do most things for your future and something for your living here and now that makes you happy. If you're totally frugal, and you walk around in old battered clothes and you rent a hole in the ground for $5, just so that you put 100% of your net into that growth pot, you will actually fail to live. You can't surrender living and enjoying and breathing and moments of freedom on your freedom scooter, burning through Namibia. And the trip before this that I can also tell you a tale or two about, when we went via Botswana, Zimbabwe to Vic Falls, all the way up to Lake Kariba, stopped for the day, did the water rafting down the great, I think it's the Zambezi, I better get my facts straight, up in northern Zimbabwe, stayed in the beautiful rock B&Bs. All you could only really drive up to the front in four-wheel drives or the bikes that we were on. Incredible trips and tours that I will, again, as I say, narrate at greater leisure, maybe now or at later point. You've got to live. You've got to live, you've got to relax, you've got to breathe. Otherwise it becomes too intense. And you've got to live a little and you've got to have a little bit of enjoyment. But you can't let the enjoyment become the dominant slice, especially in these reset times. So during my UK period, I have to weave this in. I saw an incredible clip with a South African DJ here. I need to get his full name, Cliff. Maybe I'll put it in the bottom. And he was being ostracized for writing a letter to Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, saying lockdown is doing damage to particularly the poor, but to most businesses, and that it's time it was lifted. And they got a social justice warrior and this very leftist news reader, neither of which were what I'd call white. And they started with, why is it we should listen to someone with white privilege writing to the president about damage to the poor and the rest of the community. So it kicked off straight away with that tone. And the whole thing hinged on them being victims and this man having excessive privilege. And I want to say, as someone who was dragged into the military as a white male, not out of choice, I faced either 6 years of conscientious objector at the age of 17 or 2 years in the army, 6 years where you would clean toilets in public toilets and be chased around as conscientious objector to the military service at a very young age, or the police force for 4 years where you would crack down on your own citizens. I chose 2 years away where whatever damage I caused would be in another country because it was the most benign option. And that was because of my gender and my skin color. No one's ever explained to me, as someone born in South Africa, why the white females, for example, in the same country would be 2 years ahead in their career, their study, when I came out, but as a male I was more privileged. That anyone of a different ethnicity to me would not have had that 2 year, call it a prison sentence if you like. I actually make the most of it, and I would go so far now as to say, in retrospect, it was the best 2 years of life that I would never choose to have again. But I was an English speaker with a predominant Afrikaans culture. There were people that resented me for my language, that said my people or forefathers had put their forefathers in concentration camps and didn't like me for that fact. And this actually points to the Boer War, and it is actually a true fact, by the way. Instead of the Nazis being the first of concentration camps, putting man, women and children in concentration camps, the British were the first, and that's the only way they could win the war against the Boers. They were supposed to end in a couple of weeks, and ended up turning into a massive embarrassment for the huge British Empire. So there is historical fact to that, although I certainly don't represent the British Empire. I'm one of the most cautious, reproachful of them and their history, but my father was born an Englishman, so he had some validity. But anyway, 2 years of resentment amongst people that resent me, an officer's course where largely we would be tortured, physically tortured in a legal way. Some went overboard. Some people had us drink hot water until we puked our breakfasts up at 4:30 in the morning, and then you trained the whole day without any carbs in your stomach, because that's supposed to make you tough. That's supposed to make you strong. And I went for that little detour for 2 years. And when I finished getting my MBA, much later after army and studying, and got 6 firsts in the subjects that I'm particularly passionate about, like international finance. I was already a trader then and massively interested in markets. So purchasing power parity, international finance, these were topics I absolutely loved and enjoy my MBA and got some of the highest scores in there. And I was then looking for a job. I couldn't get a job because I needed to get hired by banks. Yes, those same awful institutions. I wanted to be a trader. And at the time, if you wanted to trade, you had to be with banks. And why? All those institutions were retooling up to meet their quota requirements. The BEE was already well on the way during that period in the 90s. They all knew that there was this sort of first world realm that was pretty Anglo-Saxon, and then there was this completely third world realm, which was largely black African. So there was a panic to find people. I couldn't get employed. That's right. Successfully MBA with coming first in a number of subjects and having A pluses and A's in 4 of the core subjects. I couldn't get employed, not with Investec, not with Bank Board of Executives, not with everyone I wrote to. Sent CVs out, followed up with calls, did everything. In the end, I left. I left South Africa, unemployable, having done my 2-year prison sentence and waged onwards with my study after a short spell in the health and fitness career. And I came over to the UK where I took off. I was employed quickly. At the time, not a bad base salary, about 35 grand sterling. I made with commissions about 68 in my first year, and then I never made less than the 6-digit sum in the UK. So actually, I'm still trying to understand the white privilege that exists in South Africa. Everyone's experience is unique, and I don't think this concept of being born guilty or being born privileged absolutely washes it all well, but it's an extremely popular leftist thing. And if I'm here and I show any form of wealth, it's because I was privileged, not because I developed a set of skill sets that were utilizable in a first world environment and were reasonably good at executing them, whether it was representing a corporation that did research and consulting to the financial institutions when I first arrived in the UK, not because I formed a property development company and spotted the low interest rate cycle and developed property and could see a big macro trend and formed a partnership and company that later did 7,000, knocking on the door, my apologies, of 6.5 million a year in revenues at its big month in a time when that money is probably about twice what it is today. Apparently you're privileged. You're privileged just because you might have had parents that are white. Well, I am grateful for my parents. I'm very grateful for them. I'm grateful for the values they bestows. But what happened to all the other people? What were their parents doing that they disadvantaged their children so much? Why don't people ask that question? Anyway, I'm done with that sidebar. I couldn't help it. Sorry. It is a bit of a whinge of mine. Anyway, so going back to cars and depreciating assets, my history in cars is eventually we got to a situation that same property company was incredibly cash generative and very profitable. And we were doing really well. And we had very little to deduct as expenses. So we had an environment where tax, if you had cash that you'd made and you made a purchase for a vehicle that you needed as a company car, you could, in fact, you would pay company perks tax, but you could hide that cash. So in a very profitable year in the UK, my then partner and I both bought a pair of Bentley GTs, which was the car of the moment at the time. It was many of the footballers were in them. It was amazing. It had 550 brake horsepower. It essentially had it had twin turbo V12. In fact, it was a W12, I have to say. So that's 2 Vs. It was an absolute bus. It had double glazed windows, which were phenomenal. You didn't hear a thing in there. It was like traveling in an office. A very comfortable seat, which as a man who does a lot of sitting down, I truly appreciate. And it was literally at the time the VW's key car outside of the Bugattis at the top end of the luxury brand range. I had driven Porsche Turbos of the time, the 997 and Galados, and my partner and I were petrol heads through and through. So this time our justification was we get to postpone a tax payment, and we could put essentially £225,000 out of the corporate mix by buying these 2 cars as company cars. Later, of course, the control structure turned up the company corporate taxes on having a company car to the point that it eventually invalidated this. And if we're honest, there was a little bit of petrol-headed desire in both of us to have Bentley GT Mulliners. Yes, indeed, I even had a baby seat for my then daughter that had the Bentley logo. So while she's lived a very ordinary life for a short while, she was like a princess to the manor born. That was an incredible car, had incredible stories at the late at night, fetching contracts to complete a major block of properties, where I was going all the way down to Plymouth, a finger in England, driving back at 2, 3 in the morning in pouring rain at a ridiculous speed to meet my then partner halfway up Britain in Nottingham so that he could get contracts to do a completion the next day, because these people couldn't post mail and we couldn't get any delivery down. And it was just a great ownership prospect. But can I tell you, I sold it at £82,500, and you can buy that vehicle today. I tell you not, the very vehicle that in the middle of the night on a 3-lane empty highway in torrential rain, I did 140 miles per hour in, and saw a chute of water coming out the back that looked like a speedboat from Mars, in this 2.5-ton 4-wheel drive vehicle that never felt unstable at any point, in a bend, and feeling myself pulled towards the window as I was going around curves and sweeps in the middle of the night, passing the odd truck that wondered what satellite had just crash landed into the planet Earth. I tell you what, it's an incredible ownership prospect, and you can buy them now for mid-20s, £1,000, £30,000, etc. So the point here is, I got out and took a bit of a wash, but I got a deal getting in. It took about a 20k wash, but we knew that, and we'd accepted that. Would I have done that today? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As part of my downgrade ladder, for those of you that like Mercedes, I got an SL55. It was a supercharged Messerschmitt of a car with a panoramic roof. This is something I love to this day, and this is lifestyle, and the vehicle of today is no longer nearly as ridiculous a percentage of my wealth as that one crashed Porsche that I mismanaged hopelessly was, which was essentially 85% probably of my total net worth, if I'm entirely frank. But I got a little wiser, and I did downgrade. It was a downgrade. I got an SL55 with a panoramic roof. This is something I love to this day. That's visibility, and that's part of lifestyle that goes with a motorcycle concept. And so if you like cars, black SL55, beautiful car, sounded like a Messerschmitt, roaring along with its supercharged. Terrible consumer of petrol. Gas just cost an absolute mega fortune, and long-term ownership prospects. While I enjoyed driving it and I loved the cabriolet, I let it go. Mixed in between that, before one of the first cars I had in the UK, I love colors. I had a Mora purple with Arizona sun interior E46 M3 cabriolet. For those of you that like it, absolutely cranky color. My pet chameleon hated it. The purple with the orange interior, and it was meant to clash. It was meant to be cranky, and I loved it. But what do all these things say? It was fun and part lifestyle, and I think you have to spend 15% of your net in doing things that you enjoy. But I do assess that you want to put 75 to 85% for reset. And I would say right now, if you're late and you're doing catch up, the allocation to enjoyment has to be a bit more meager. You have to recognize that for every, and I'll tell you a story about Warren Buffett playing golf. He was complaining about his wife that actually did a little bit of a redeck in the house. This is a guy that was already many times over a multi-billionaire. His wife had spent $10,000 on curtains, paraphernalia inside the house to make the house look prettier. And while he was talking to his mates on the golf course, he said, do you have any idea what $10,000 compounded over 10 years actually is? I can't get over the amount she spent. This is Warren Buffett, who drove, a third-hand old car for the better part of till it was about 20 years old before eventually succumbing to getting a relatively new vehicle. And that's, don't go to that extreme, but understand that consumption today is postponed investment growth later, and the compound interest equation is brutal. And this is what the control structure is always known, and this is what it's never taught you at school. The hidden soul, the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest. And that's the game. So the success story of the marshmallow kids, postponed consumption today for double the outcome tomorrow. You probably heard the story. The kids that were deemed the most successful in life were the ones that would postpone eating a marshmallow today, could overcome the desire to buy a marshmallow. I think they suck, actually, and I wouldn't eat it, but let's just say chocolate candy of choice for my American friends. Those that postponed on the basis that they would have twice as many tomorrow were the more successful later in life, and they followed them. In other words, postponed consumption is future wealth, thanks to compound interest, providing you do something with it. If you leave it as fiat in the bank account, you will have gone wrong. If I took every 20-cent piece, every pound coin I ever put in a slot machine, a game to play Asteroids, Space Invaders, the early ones, from Mooncrester to Defender to every game since, it's amazing I'm not a gamer today. I just kind of was done with all of that. Maybe I grew up a little bit. It's possible. But if I had all of that money and I'd bought gold, we'd all be millionaires and billionaires today. But the point is, you've got to have something for yourself in the here and now. There's some value to being in the moment, and that's what you need to do. And that right there represents the freedom and in the moment, and it doesn't represent a disproportional percentage. If I had a Bugatti Veyron, it absolutely would be the same as the young Francis with his black Porsche Carrera, and his entire net worth tied up in his car. And that's not an indication. They're not even the Veyron's not even the current model anymore. But you get my point. Depreciating assets, you've got to detect how much emotional value that's going to give you, how much freedom, how much current in the moment pleasure it'll give you. And for those of you that were asking, so what was the car? The car was second-hand car. It's a Discovery 4. It has 3 sunroofs. I load scuba gear, bike gear, pull a trailer. It's one of those unforgivable diesels that cause smog, which means it's cheaply fueled, it's more reliable, it's more economical, and it will, having got over its initial depreciation, it'll run very well. I've got the HSC version, trimmings and everything, and low cost. It's particularly affordable in this country, so I'm not exceptional, and that is a good combination for me of giving everybody a nice drivable experience. You load the shopping in, you push the button, it's at the right height. I like getting out at the right height. I don't like sitting on the floor where I have to get out and stand up. I'm done with the notion of Lamborghinis and things like that. They have no practical use. It's old tech that's going to be killed by auto driving. These things will become museum items. They will be wasted. They're going to fall through the floor. So to all the crypto moon Lambo guys, this is Luno, by the way, a South African exchange, the biggest, and I think in the top 10 now globally, from what I heard, top 10 best rate. For all those moon Lambo kids, the Lambo's not the way. The obstacle is the way. The Lambo's not the way. The Lambo is to tease you off the path of wealth building. So we had some amazing cars, and we learned some amazing lessons. I never made money on a car once. In fact, the only one I did was, there was one, and that was after it got stolen, and that was when it was introduced new for much less, and the rand devalued so much that on paper I made money. It was a GTI, it was a CTI actually. We have a City Golf here that was made in South Africa long after it expired, which was essentially the Mark I Golf, and it had the later Golf GTI's engine in it. Instead of doing the big jumbo, the Golf Jumbo and the Golf 2s and 3s that got fat and heavy and big, you got the small original body that was boxy, a little bit refined. You got mags and better colors and a more sportier steering wheel, a tighter gear ratio so you could go through the gears, and then you got the current GTI engine dropped in it, which of course was far more powerful. For a young kid, hot hatch, it was great. And I bought one of the very first, and it got stolen and used in a bottle store robbery down in the Cape, as you do. And I don't know about robbing the bottle store as a great idea. I thought banks are where the money's at, and then crashed. I got it repaired and rode it, and then it was stolen a second time. So they were very popular because they were small and zippy. So South Africa had a high car theft problem then, and I actually got settled by the insurer because they went up to retail for 46,000 when I'd got in at 29, 950, technologically just under the 30k level. They went up to be worth 46,000 when I had the value of the insurer, a new one, even though it was the same car. And that was devaluation of currency. So I actually got settled 31,000 on a 29,950. It's the only time I got all my money back. And there was huge currency devaluation during that period. Wasn't the same rands. And it was a very good deal that I got in on the first time. It was kind of to get market share, and then later that to price them more like what they were with real profits in. So that's a rarity, and it's a pure exception. So what's the message of this? Well, a couple of things. Stay out of depreciating assets, but do enough to enjoy your life in the here and now for within a given percentage. So the live life now, 15% a fund, which is your holidays, your scuba gear, your motorcycles, if you like that. Don't kill yourself, and other things. And then the rest must go into the future and the wealth. Because when you start to feel you have a future, you're more comfortable living in the now. You have to work on both. If you just live in the now, you have this uneasy feeling you're not being smart, and that a day of reckoning is awaiting you. And I'm here to tell you it absolutely is. And I'm someone who faced his own day of reckoning and literally hit the wall. And plenty to share on that, but that's one for another day. So avoid the depreciating assets. So long ramble, long story. Let's go back to the matrix. So what if I could indicate to you which companies are making the Genesis chip, let's say, of 5G that will be in everything? The Internet of Things, the kettle, the car for autonomous driving, all your mobile devices, absolutely every single one, communicating off a standard platform so that a Mac and an iPhone can talk to a Samsung Android that could talk to a Nokia that can talk to anything. That one car's chip can stay a certain distance away from another car's chip when you're autonomously driving in your driverless cars in the future. What if you could invest in that company now? And let's say you have tons of reservations about 5G. You have tons of reservations about where you're taken. Just like Plato, about whether we would still be able to remember things. Just like Henry Ford's clients that said they preferred horses that had more personality than a car. Just like all the other people that resisted progress. Just like the guys that are currently putting limpet mines on 5G towers. What if you could buy the shares of the chips, and that would make an insane 50,000%? Would you find $5,000 to put $1,000 in 5 different early stage companies? Do you remember ARM in the UK? Cambridge, pretty MI6 territory that. Cambridge, they do all their recruiting there, a lot of tech goes on there. Got bought out, ARM. I remember we had an HVF, boom, taken out, target. The purchase price was the HVF target. By the way, if you want to find out about HVF method, links below. It's fascinating to me. How does the geometry in a pattern, technical analysis pattern, end up giving you the price the acquiring company will pay for the company that you've just traded and didn't know was facing an acquisition? It's an unbelievable story, that. Bit of background noise, forgive me for a second. So, what if you could buy the next ARM? What if it's stuffed with intelligent people? Intelligence people. That's different. Let's forget the intelligent people. Let's say there are some, but they're all intelligence. What if it's all the dark state operators we're supposed to hate? What are all the people that are tracking us and collecting our data and managing our freedoms? But by investing in it, you could make 25,000%, 50,000%, possibly 100,000%. Would you have bought Cisco when it was a penny stock? Would you have bought Microsoft when it IPO'd? Would you be happy to own those shares? What if you hodled and could forget about $1,000 in 5 different chips companies or enablers? They don't all have to be chip companies. They can just be, if a monkey jumps on my back, don't be surprised. They always say, you've got a monkey on your back, Francis. Yeah, anyway, so what if you could do it? Well, maybe we need to open ourselves up to this moment where there's huge resistance, is another revolution where unbelievable profits are going to be made over the next decade. In other words, we're having another revolutionary change that is going to see chips everywhere, moving into everything. Do you want to invest in those companies while writing letters to MP, making sure they're safe? Do you want to be an activist shareholder that can actually say, hey, are we making sure these things are good for people, and at least have a voice because you're on the register? Or do you want to be the guy that lights fires? I'm just asking. I'm kind of glad in a way that there's guys that light fires. I'm not going to tell you I'm not. I ain't changed. There's no flippening. But for me, do I want to be that guy? I don't want to go to jail for lighting a fire under an aerial. Personally, I don't think it serves me. I don't think it serves my wealth building. And I think it's like throwing a penny at a moving train. The degree that you slow it from its journey is probably not that much. We need resistance. And I'm grateful that there's people that do demonstrative things. But you've also got to be smart. You've also got to be smart. Would the control structure kill themselves? If it's that deadly, how are they going to survive? That's a question I don't always get answered. If everything is completely deadly, I mean, imagine when electricity was introduced. Let's just do this as a thought experiment. Hey guys, there's this thing that if it shocks you at 10,000 volts, you're fried and you're dead. Hey guys, we're going to put it on wooden posts up and down your street. So if ever there's a storm or rain and it blows over and you get touched on this, you're fried as well. I'm going to put it outside your home. It's awesome technology. It's going to change your life, really. But hey guys, if you get a shock in the home, you'll be dead without earthed. Hey guys, all sorts of radio waves are changed by the fact that this happens, and we don't really know the fullness of its extent. Are you going to say, I'm going to spend the rest of my life lighting fires? I see no purpose for electricity. Electricity is everywhere. It's dangerous. It spoils the sky. You were a blue sky guy, now you have poles. You go on a quiet road in the middle of Death Valley, somewhere where nothing moves apart from the odd scorpion. And you see poles with potential obstacles that could fry you. Are we blowing up electricity poles? Why not? Do you know the fullness that electricity could change your life? Yeah, I think we do. We grew up around it. What are your kids going to be thinking about 5G? They're just going to crack on. They're not going to be thinking about it. It's not even conscious. This is what the control structure relies on. They do tighten up with each passing of generation. It doesn't mean that's good. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be fighting for liberties and privacy and all sorts of things. But at the same time, we should have stopped electricity, man. It's bloody dangerous. Any idea how dangerous it is? Thousands of watts with stations with danger. Do not go in. Places you just can't go. Where it used to be free to roam. You had freedom. You had privacy. You could roam there. Now you can't. Now there's security fences around it. And there's wires in the sky everywhere. Yeah. Sometimes we have to think about the opportunity as well. Do we want to make money? Do we want to build wealth? And do we want to be a wealthy slave of the system that can game the system? Do you want to be the lieutenant who had more weeks off in his second year cooking the system and getting a good life and being paid 5 times more than the average soldier that was indicted with him, that never got a weekend off every 6 weeks? Maybe it's time to be Lieutenant Hunt. Game the system. be in the matrix, make the right investments, recognize it's revolutionary, recognize the bigger the resistance by the people and the more scary it is, the more money you stand to make. Should we be investing in unicorns? I spoke of on previous YouTubes the hold your nose trades. It stinks. I don't want to be associated with it. I don't like what it stands for, but it's going up. Who's that? It was Amazon. I gave you over a year ago a hold your nose trade investment portfolio. I discussed it. I told you Microsoft. I told you Amazon. You all know the names. Alphabet. I told you every single one of them. Do you know that they're all up? Apple. They're all up 40, 50, 60%. And in this epic stock market collapse that has hollowed out small and medium-sized businesses, that most of the moderate-sized equities are 30, 40% down, all these other things, including Tesla, are near all-time highs. In a depression, guys. It's a depression. The unicorns are at or near all-time highs. Amazon, unbelievable. Microsoft, unbelievable. Apple snapback, unbelievable. Tesla at $180 with all the big shorts, now trading 800s and 900s. Don't make your life more difficult than you have to. They're bitches. We hate them. It's a hold your nose equity investment. Now I'm saying to you, before those listed, the real money was made. If you bought Facebook at the IPO, you would have 4x'd your money at the IPO. All the people who made money, including Bono, the big sellout of U2, were invited to invest early round. The original 500,000 made 21 billion. The guys that got into the early tier rounding. Now, who's going to invite you to that? You guys are going to say, I am not an insider. I ain't going to be invited to that. Well, there's some people doing research that are doing early prospect corporations, that are doing newly listed corporations at $1.30, and some that you can only buy the token for that hope to list at some point, that are all involved in the tech that may have toll gates to the bridge of 5G. I'm just saying, would you want a piece? Would you gamble? Could I put $1,000 in 5 equities? Would that $5,000 change my life? Would it stop me from being able to ride my bikes? Freedom, will it make such a hole in my budget that I couldn't just forget about them and leave them and treat it as written off and lost and not have to hang myself? I can do it. I can do it. And if you can't, let me just say 500. Put 100 in each. Some of these have taken $100 to millions and to hundreds of thousands. Some of these have taken $100 to hundreds of thousands and millions. And I'm saying this is a polarizing event in every level. Most people are going to become part of the UBI global underclass. That's right. Most people are going to become part of the UBI global underclass. SMEs are dying. Let me talk to you about Google and YouTube. I talk about all the evils. So let's demartini this. Talk about all the evils that it's involved. Because of a YouTube channel, I've never officially really spent a penny on marketing. That's not technically entirely true. We tried a little bit of click stuff once or twice. Just wrote it off. Didn't work. Didn't do it effectively. This YouTube channel is my entire marketing thing. My first property business, before YouTube was even owned by Google, when it was still Mr. MySpace, Rupert Murdoch that had owned YouTube. What a buy that was. Should never have been allowed to happen. Complete monopoly. But anyway, let's pass all those points that I've made countless times before. My property business, my sole contribution to the business was I could find buyers. And I could find buyers, and the partner out in the field could find properties at discounts and buy on scale. And he was where we needed them to be, where the yield stacked up, and I was down south where the investment money was. And how did I find buyers? I got somebody to knock together a very basic, ugly as sin website that if I showed you today, I'd love to actually have a picture of how it looked. It's called Honey Badger Property Investments. Honey Badger. This is Before Bitcoin, let me tell you, honey badger property investments, because they were nuggety little bastards that even in the African desert lived out a life. They boxed way above their weights. They'll chase lions away. And honey badger property investments, let me tell you, we sold millions of stock, some of which we had got secured 20% discounts for. We were passing on 10, 15% to other people. We were making 5%, 6%, and 10%. We were charging finder's fees. We had a really profitable business because it was clear that property was going to boom. And I lost my spirit for that business the minute I realized the scam and that there was a bus coming. I couldn't continue it. I remember the day I stopped getting out of bed. But my biggest contribution during the boom period, which was the early 2000s going into 2006, when I suddenly saw valuers not even properly valuing things, just waving things through, I realized at the end, the people that are buying these things are going to get hurt. And I was one of those buyers in the beginning. I was finding for myself and for others. And I suddenly said, this ain't going to end well. And that was the end of the business for me. But during the period that it was working and the people were making money, and we had people that we made substantial amount of wealth for, whose properties went up very, very highly and made a real positive effect on their life. Guys that I got big balance sheets from next to nothing. And my sole skill was, and it wasn't even my skill, I asked someone how to do it, and he had a bit more skill than me, and he showed me, and then I just did it. And that was AdWords. AdWords on Google with a cheap and nasty property site that I could host a few pictures up and someone could register their interest. And then we'd pick up the phone and call them and meet them at site and show them the plans and show them the building. And that could all be done by the partner up where the property existed. In other words, Google AdWords made my business. Google AdWords and Google search, for all the horrible things I've said of them, put me in a Bentley GT. Google AdWords had me flying to Turkey to watch Champions League and paying thousands to get 2 tickets for my stepson and I to watch the match. Google AdWords and Google paid for all my homes that I had, that I grew up. YouTube today are the source of 95% of my clients. Right here where I'm releasing this video and swearing blind about the origin, culture, ethnicity, intent, privacy invasion of all aspects of YouTube and Google, have given me that Freedom motorbike, that Discovery 4 in the double garage, the right to drive around on the golf cart in an amazing estate, the chance to feed monkeys outside my front door, with free roaming deer, guinea fowl in the bush, feeling like I'm living in the bush with a rim flow pool. YouTube gave it to me, thanks to you, and I thank you every day, all of you, including those that will never do business with me, which is most of you. But the point is, at what point do we recognize the De Martini element, that everything that takes also gives? At what point was the white privilege that took 2 years of my flipping goddamn life away from me and threw me into the army, did I actually get the biggest freaking gift? So maybe I am privileged. I got given that experience that no one could have bought. I was fed, I was homed, I was kept bloody fit. I fired weapons. I fired every weapon because I went to the office corps. I could fire a cannon. I could drive an armored car. I could do fire and movement with a patrol. I could coordinate a live conventional warfare attack with an entire platoon, with mortars, with automatic fire MAGA, with belts, and with 60 infantrymen of various roles, including medics. I could commandeer that. I could commandeer billions of assets. Ammo, never ending, no shortage. I could shoot out in a day thousands of rounds, fire mortars, in a field where I could do no harm. I could lead and be measured and given feedback on a live attack running through bush where you could barely see sometimes your friends, driving a conventional warfare strike. My fitness today and the ability to maybe carry on a bit more than other people in my age in the northern hemisphere, that particularly that I see in cold climates that never did military service. Hey, that prison sentence for 2 years could have been my biggest gift. This 5G revolution, which is coming to give you cancer and drive COVID into your cells and whatever else, could be your biggest investment gift. You could have one of these Earth satellite homes in New Mexico, custom built, luxury spec, with car tires. You could have 5, 10 bedrooms. You could live off grid. You could buy the biggest plot. You could have your own armored car to protect yourself. That 5G might just do it for you, if you investigate. So these guys that call me privileged, to which I push back, maybe they're right. Maybe it was the best thing. I was a young tearabout. I wasn't up to any good. I needed my energy harnessing. I needed to understand discipline. I needed to understand cleaning, real cleaning, polishing, shining. I needed to get a chance to commandeer assets of such huge value that it was a huge responsibility that I had to be groomed up towards, so that someone could put a gold star on my shoulder and said, this man can lead a battle as a platoon commander over an entire platoon with sergeants, corporals, one-liners, medics, maggers, mortars, could call in airstrikes from fighter planes, could talk on a bush radio. I needed that sidebar. So thank you for my white privilege. Thank you for everything that's happened in my life. True flipping gratitude. Thank you for all the stupid, dumbass mistakes I made, because they are what added up in the formula that made me today, and in the same way for you. Thank you for going bust and hitting the wall and learning and picking up the pieces and finding your humility. Thank you for recognizing that you are a microcosm of a total system that is also going bust and hitting the wall. And if you truly understand it, you can come out better. You can come out a whole bunch better. Thank you for everything. The broken rib on that bike. That's how he kissed me welcome. Snap him, boy. Because it says learn your skills. Learn your skills properly. It's a feedback mechanism. It's not good nor bad. It's a feedback mechanism where you are. If it's too hot, you're losing concentration, stop. Have a drink of water. Don't press on, lose concentration, and go head over, arse over tit on your bike and break a flipping rib because you're wearing something with a buckle on that you shouldn't have had. All the mistakes are made. It's feedback. It's all just feedback. And let me tell you, the biggest revolutions are the goddamn biggest opportunities, and they're coming at you now, and we're sleepwalking in misery porn. And I'm the biggest orchestrator of misery porn. And I want to apologize for that, because there's opportunity in here. There's huge, huge, goddamn 100,000% opportunity that for cost of a flipping steak and chips could set you up for the rest of your goddamn life. The very Google and YouTubes I chastise and loathe have given me everything I have. This is the great irony. This is the Demartini. This is everything. Right now, how much must we spend our time in mental hate, enmity, hopelessness, disempowerment? How much time do you want to? Get a freedom bike. Blow it out. Do something stupid. Speed on a desert highway. Come back fresh. The freedom's still there. You can visit any time. Like, build your wealth so that you can always pay for your plane ticket to haul your bike the other side of an empty desert. Because it's there waiting for you. It loves you. It wants you to come visit. Break the shackles of your mind. Seize the opportunity. I am Francis Hunt, the market sniper, the crypto sniper, the reset sniper. And you can spend more time with me in the link below by joining our amazing community of like-minded people. Trading is not for everybody. If you have no money, I love you still. Grab your mini-series. I was a bust, broken flush that had to borrow £40, £100 actually, from his brother to change a wheel on his car. In his early 40s. Humility. I know it. You'll be great soon. Unleash the shackles of your mind. The mini-series is for you. Costs you nothing. Okay, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. That's my weekend narrative, my weekend tale, plus some info on cars and what they mean, and depreciating assets, and the opportunities staring right now at us all. Don't let's be a hog in the misery porn and fail to see the opportunities that every one of those things bring. All the best to you. Bye for now.